Sometimes people ask me where I get the characters that I put in my stories, and I answer that by saying that my characters are created by the dialogue. All my life, I've been a pretty careful observer of how people speak. Being both a journalist and a psychologist, I pay attention to what people say, and I pay attention to the way they say it. So consequently, when I create a character, I don't really care much about their physical description. I mean, you can put that in later or not at all, and I tend not to put in much physical description, a little bit, but not a considerable amount of description, because in my mind, the person's image is created by what he says and how he says it. Now, some fiction writers, they very carefully, when they construct the dialogue, they will say, so-and-so surmised, so-and-so conjectured, so-and-so, I don't even know the words they use, but there's, one time I wrote down a list of all the different words you could use, attribution words instead of said, S-A-I-D, all the different things that you could use. And I tend to use said. And the reason for that is because in journalism, you're supposed to use said. Said is kind of a neutral word. It tells you that a person said something. It doesn't put emotion into the phrase. And as a journalist, you're not supposed to do that. When a person speaks, you simply report that he said it, and you let his words tell you how he said it. Well, of course, in fiction, you can do anything you want. You can put as much subjectivity into a speech as you want. I do a little bit of that, but I tend to let the dialogue tell the reader what it is that the guy is thinking, or how he's feeling, or what his emotional state is. If you do that, I think, then the reader has an opportunity to get involved with the story in a little better way. You're not telling him what to think. He's hearing the words, and he's making his own conclusions as to what to think. So that's the way I like to approach it. I like to let the dialogue carry the story and let the dialogue create the image of the character. Now, some people will ask me, well, do you look at a real person and pattern that character after that real person? And the answer is no. Generally, no, I don't. I don't have a real human being in mind when I'm describing a character. First of all, I don't really describe the characters that much. And second of all, the dialogue is coming from a vast array of words that I've heard strung together in the past, and the creativity of stringing them together in new ways. I'm not reporting what a real person said. It is, after all, fiction. Now, do certain phrases crop into the dialogue that you've actually heard or said? Well, yeah, sure, of course. I mean, it's unavoidable. But is it a copy of a real human being? No. And most fiction books will include in the front page or two that, any relationship to real characters is purely coincidental, that sort of stuff. I do think it's interesting that there are people out there that think that you've written about them. To me, that's comical, because chances are it's not true. I mean, they see themselves. What that tells me is that I've done a good job of creating a character that has very believable dialogue. Now, in the Look for Me, I Will Find You series, there is one character who, in a sense, is based on a real human being. I know this guy really well, and I asked him if I could pattern a character after him, and he said, sure, he'd be delighted for me to do that. And so I did. I mean, I needed a character like that. I knew something about his real background. In the book, I put a fictional name, but I put background that was genuine. And when he read the book, because I let him read it before I published it. I wanted him to say yes or no. Could I say these things, and was I accurate? And when he read it, he said he was surprised that I knew as much as I did. It was a pretty interesting remark coming from him. I mean, he wrote me an email, and he was blown away, because he said I put personality things into that character that he knew I did not know about him. These were professional things that he had done in the course of his work that I'd never observed and he had never talked to me about. And actually, I didn't know him as well when I wrote it as I do today. I know him better today, as kind of as a result of that experience. We got to know each other better. And in his email, he said, "How long have we known each other, Doug?" Thinking, had we known each other in a previous life? And it comes back to the whole premise of the story. He has entertained the possibility that we've had some contact before. Either that, or I just really guessed well as to what his personality was on the job, which I'd never seen, never observed. I think what makes a successful novelist is a person who can not only create a good plot, a good story, a good premise, a good beginning, a good ending, but a person who can create believable characters, people that fit their own personality, and what they say is consistent within their own personality, and they have certain failings, they have certain strengths. To do this, you simply, as a writer, you simply must be a good observer of the world. You must know how people react in certain situations. You must know what a person is likely to say, or how he's likely to say it, or how he's likely to respond if something odd happens to him. As for the words, just exactly what they say, I don't know why in this particular project it's been so easy, because I would get a character started in a scene and the dialogue between him and another character would just flow just as fast as I could type it, almost as though I was nothing but a reporter and I was just simply putting the words down that I had heard before. I mean, that's what it felt like. It felt like I had witnessed the scene, that I had been there, I had seen the scene, and I came home and sat down at the typewriter and reported it as I remembered it. Now, a lot of people, if they go to a meeting or talk to somebody and you ask them an hour later to sit down and write the dialogue of what transpired, most of them can't do it. But I've been doing it for decades as a reporter and as a psychologist. The ability to listen and remember and write down what people say, I've practiced that a lot in the real world. So that makes it easy in a fictional world to do the same thing. And I think that's the most fun part about a piece of fiction is the dialogue. Not only to write, but to read as well. I mean, I'd rather read dialogue than read long narrative passages. The narrative passages are important and they're necessary. They have to be there. But to me, it's the dialogue that carries it. Now, a lot of my readers are saying that my books are like screenplays. And that's true. I mean, I paint a picture, create a setting, here's what it looks like, here's the characters, and then they talk. It's the dialogue that makes a motion picture what it is. I mean, obviously you've got scenery, sets, backgrounds, circumstances, situation, but it's the dialogue between the two characters, or three or four or five characters. It's the dialogue that is the screenplay. And I think most screenwriters will agree with that. Yeah, you have to have a good story, a good idea, a good premise, but even a good premise can fall flat if the dialogue is bad. And so I guess I'm just very fortunate that I've been able to learn how to do dialogue over the years. Although I will say, going back, I don't know when I first started writing fiction, 30 years ago, I was pretty good at dialogue then. I think dialogue has always been a strong suit, and one of the failings of some of my earlier fiction is that the story wasn't that good. The premise wasn't that good. And so the stories, they kind of struggle. Now, I've written a few that haven't been published yet that we're going to eventually publish where the story is good. And, I'll look at that and see if I can improve those. I mean, it's funny when you write something and put it down for 20 years, you come back and you look at it, and sometimes you say, wow, I can't believe I wrote that. That was good. Or you come back and say, golly, I thought this was good at the time. And that's something about the current project that's interesting. The concept that when you write something, as soon as you're finished with it, you think, that's the best thing I've ever written. You're excited about that particular project. I mean, it always works that way, and whatever you've written most recently is the thing that you believe is the best you've ever done. Now, I have said for years that the best book I ever wrote was The Land of the Nunch. And that's a fiction book that I wrote in, I think it was 1986. And it's a really good book. It's a really great story. It's well done. It sold marginally well. I wrote a sequel to it, a number 2, and the number 2 was pretty good. And then I wrote about half of the third one. There was going to be a trilogy. I wrote half of the third one and got interrupted. Literally, the phone rang. And I got busy and I didn't get back to it and didn't get back to it. And even though I have the notes on the plot, I know where it's going, I haven't gotten back to it in that many years. One thing I should do when I finish the Look For Me series and finish the screenplays for Look For Me, I need to go back and finish the Land of the Nunch trilogy because it's really pretty good stuff, I think. I also wrote a book called Dreambox and another book called Dust Puddle, and there was going to be a third in that one too. I didn't write the third one because, once again, got interrupted. Things, had to make a living. Dreambox is interesting because it's based upon a futuristic society where a company creates a dream machine that you crawl into and you punch buttons and you're able to elicit a particular dream. And this is based on some theoretical research that I did. It's theoretically possible that you can cause people to have certain kinds of dreams. So anyway, this company, futuristic company, has perfected this machine, and people use it and get addicted to it. And then, of course, the corporation uses it for evil. And there's a psychiatrist and his secretary who, try to foil the plot. That's Dreambox. And then Dust Puddle, the sequel, same corporation has now created an anti-anxiety chamber, which is a box that you get into when you feel anxious or stressed out or whatever, and you punch buttons and it causes you to feel better. Well, what we learned is that the anti-anxiety chamber requires endorphins from human beings to operate. So this company hires homeless people to literally extract the endorphin from them, which is done through traumatizing them. So there's some pretty dramatic scenes there, and our hero and the psychiatrist and his secretary also track that down and foil the plot. And then that book, it was perfectly set up for the third in the series. The very ending of that set up the third one, which I never wrote. So that's two trilogies that were never completed. The dialogue in The Land of the Nunch and the sequel to that, the dialogue was good, I thought. The characters were good, the plot and everything was good. The dialogue in Dust Puddle and Dreambox was not as good. A little contrived, I think. And that's something I can fix. But in the Look For Me, I Will Find You series, just my opinion, the dialogue is very smooth, works out very well. And that's what the readers are telling me, too. I mean, they're getting into these characters as a result of the dialogue. Now, the question is, when we get to filming the motion pictures, how much of a stickler am I going to be for people, for the actors and actresses saying the dialogue exactly the way it was written? Well, my opinion is they pretty well need to do it exactly the way it was written. And of course that makes it very difficult for the actors because they have to memorize every word right down to the exclamation marks and periods and commas and the whole bit. But then actors and actresses are good at that. They're able to memorize dialogue and deliver it to an audience again and again and again. You know, with filmmaking, they might do 5 takes, they might do 25 takes. But they deliver the dialogue again and again and again as though they were just thinking of it for the first time. That's what's amazing about a really great actor, is that he makes you think that that's original thought, and it's not. It's memorized, it's written by a writer, and he's said it 25 times. That blows my mind. The acting that I've done, I tend to get the dialogue right on about the 5th, 6th, or 7th take, and then if I have to do more takes, it deteriorates some. I start forgetting things, and then in about 20 to 25 takes, I get it right again. It's really strange. So, I mean, the secret is quit after 7 takes. Some of the stuff I've done will go 25, 30 takes, and it's like, are we getting any better, or are we just wasting time? And then when I do dialogue that I wrote myself, it's weird because I want to do it the way I wrote it, but I'm rewriting it as we go. So that makes a writer hyphen actor, that makes it hard because you want to improve it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the real fear is that you leave out a particular phrase or word that's essential to the plot, that has to be said. So I imagine a writer-actor is probably a hard beast to deal with from a director's point of view. But dialogue's really, really important, and it's fun to write, fun to read, fun to act. And in my opinion, the dialogue carries the whole project.